The project I was hinting at in my last video that I was considering doing is actually reading aloud a book that I wrote. So I'm going to put up a chapter and see what the response is. And if it's something that you guys like, then I'll continue and probably finish the book. So yeah, let me know when you see this. If you like it, let me know. All right, so Wild Running by Catherine Powers. Copyright by me, the author, under the pen name Catherine Powers. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction unless otherwise indicated. All the names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents in this book are either the product of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Now, I wrote this originally when I was about 13 and completely horse crazy. Though I didn't have that much practical experience with horses at that time, I've since edited it quite a bit, but there may be some mistakes. Most of it now has been changed to reflect my own experience with horses. The story is what I consider to be a ranch romance with mature themes, including religion. If this isn't something you're interested in, please just don't listen rather than make any negative comments. Hate isn't welcome on my channel. Constructive criticism is welcome. Just, be kind. Chapter 1. It was early summer and the heat was starting to swell in the horse country of southern Ontario. Well, Tori, we've done it. We've finally made it. We have foals on the ground, a small group of hired hands to help us keep up with the work, and we've already made a huge dent in the fencing and building department for this year, Anya Tyler exclaimed happily. She sighed contentedly as she collapsed back into the thick cushions of the ancient pale blue couch in the corner of their rather sparse living room. They had only the bare essentials decorating the room, since they didn't have a whole lot of time for fixing up the house beyond the basics they had seen to before moving in. The majority of their efforts were devoted to building up their ranch. The walls of the living room were a warm coral color that set off the highlights in the tile flooring near the outside door and brought out the warmth of the hardwood that dominated the room. The only other furniture in the room was an oval glass coffee table, a reclining chair that was so ugly it didn't match anything but the duct tape that already decorated it, and the television. There was no desk, no bookshelves, and no curtains for the large window that overlooked a good portion of the 75-acre property they had purchased the year before. They just had the few pieces of furniture they had each contributed from their previous places of residence. Anya and Tori had met in high school and had hit it off as friends almost immediately. They shared a love of animals, in particular horses, and country music, to name just a few of their common interests. When neither of them wanted a career in the academic world, they had struck a deal to join forces and finances to make a go of taking the horse world by storm, breeding, raising, and training top-quality Canadian horses. They weren't opposed to other breeds and would raise and train them if the opportunity arose, but their passion featured the hardy, temperate, and intelligent Canadian breed. They were both 23 now and had been working since high school, striving toward their dream, adding to their stock little by little, when an unexpected inheritance made their dream a reality and brought the Wild Running Ranch into existence. It had been heartbreaking for Anya to lose her parents in the tragic winter traffic accident almost 2 years earlier, but she took solace in knowing that they would have wanted their only child to make her dream a reality. They'd always stood behind her, encouraging her to follow her dreams against all odds. Losing them like that, so suddenly, had been hard for her and on her, but throwing herself into buying and building the farm the year before had also provided Anya with a much-needed distraction from her grief. The hard work the farm required of her had been therapeutic for her, and still was. Knowing that they were in heaven was also comforting. They had both believed in God and had taught her to follow their belief in Jesus and the Word of God. She read it frequently and knew that she wouldn't be where she was today without God's help. Anya closed her eyes as she forced herself to relax despite her aching muscles. The familiar soreness, as well as the bumps and bruises, was part and parcel of having a ranch and something she'd been living with on a near daily basis for the past year with no end in sight. The hard work they'd already put into the place was just the beginning. She and Tori had done a large portion of the repairs and renovations themselves, pouring their own blood, sweat, and tears into turning the run-down barn and barely livable house into a ranch they could be proud of. Doing the work themselves had only given them both a stronger bond with the land they called their own. Now that they had hired hands to help out, Tori was back to work full-time to boost their finances. She also took care of their paperwork and the majority of their correspondence. It was a strain on her and filled up her off days, But it was the least she could do since the raising and training of the horses and day-to-day operations fell heavily on Anya's shoulders. Yeah, we're well on our way, Tori agreed with a tired smile. She'd been home from work for a few hours, but had spent the majority of that time replying to emails and returning calls. She wasn't as physically exhausted as Anya was, but she still felt drained. I'm just so excited that we already have a few foals on the ground to train. This time next year, all the foals will be from our own stock, our very own lines. As excited as she was, her exhaustion was getting to Anya, and, yawning, she shifted down until she was lying on her back with her feet comfortably perched on the sassy yellow pillow at the base of the oversized sofa, her head resting on her crossed arms. Anya had just finished a grueling day with the guys, putting up the fencing that would be the largest of their new pastures, all 15 acres of it. With 20 acres for the house and surrounding buildings, smaller pastures, training areas, and a future indoor arena they were already making plans and putting aside money for, they were still left with plenty of land for hay and grain fields. This was the first year for planting and harvesting crops, and also the first year they'd be able to bring in their own hay off the fields. Fortunately for Anya, the guys knew how to run and repair the machines, so she was spared from having to learn the ropes. She shuddered at the thought. She was a farm girl through and through, but she and machines just did not get along. I'm concerned about some of the guys we've hired, Tori worried, changing the subject and dragging Anya's thoughts back to the present. Brandon is the only one worthy of trust, as far as I'm concerned. Brandon Stone was their foreman. They'd both known him for years, and he had been invaluable to them when they were collecting breeding stock and information. He knew horses better than anyone else they knew, and they trusted him almost as much as they trusted each other. I guess I can understand that, but we don't have a lot of options for experienced horse people in the area, not with the rounded skills we need anyway. We need people who can operate and fix heavy machinery, ride, train, and build. It's not easy to find all those qualities in a single person, never mind 3 or 4 of them. We have to trust Brennan to know what he's doing and what we need. She paused, then grinned after a moment as a thought entered her mind. Wait a second. Is there perhaps a new hire who's caught your eye? She teased. No way, Tori exclaimed indignantly. Anya grinned at the speed and ferocity of the answer. Yeah, okay, she said with a wink. Tori couldn't help but chuckle, even as she tossed a throw pillow at Anya's head. Anya caught it with a laugh, just as her stomach rumbled. Since I've been working so incredibly hard today, how would you like to cook for 6 people? Next week you can cook for 8, she said with a this could be the best deal of your life sort of way. She had never really had an interest in cooking, so she mostly avoided the task when she could. Since she lacked even the most rudimentary cooking skills, others had a tendency to pick up the slack to avoid the risk of being stuck eating inedible food. If you're trying to trick me into cooking supper, it's not going to work. I know you all too well, Tori responded, her dark brown eyes narrowing suspiciously at Anya from her perch on the edge of the recliner. Tori was short, barely over 5 feet tall, with dark hair and eyes that suited her olive complexion. She was almost the exact opposite of Anya, who was of average height with much lighter skin, green eyes, and auburn hair. Of course it will. It always works on you because you're too nice to decline. You know we'll starve if I cook, and you're so good at it, Anya coaxed. While that is true, flattery will not get you dinner, my friend, Tori denied, shaking her head. She was about to give in, knowing that Anya had a good point. But after a full shift of cooking at the local diner she worked at, the last thing she wanted to do was come home and cook for more people. A rap on the back door had both women looking that way in surprise. Sean Wright stood there, waiting patiently for an invitation to enter. Anya cocked a brow, wondering what he was doing up at the house so early when she was sure there was something productive he could be doing with his time down at the barn. There was plenty to do on a ranch. There were stalls to clean, fences to paint and check, horses to train, exercise, and groom, along with a myriad of other things to be done, especially since they were building it up and expanding little by little. Come on in, Sean, Anya invited. She had worked with him on and off for the past few weeks and was getting better acquainted with him. He was a character, quick-witted and always willing to do what needed done. At a few inches over 6 feet tall, he towered over both women, but he was far from intimidating. His mouth often curled up into a grin, and his dark blue eyes sparkling with humor more often than not. He was built well, a bit on the wiry side, with appealing facial features. Ladies, he acknowledged, tipping his wide-brimmed hat at them, I couldn't help but overhear a bit of your conversation, and, I don't mean to brag, but I am a fantastic gourmet chef. I would be honored to take over your kitchen as part of my duties here, he volunteered with a mock bow. And I just had her cornered into doing it too, spoil sport, Anya accused with a mock pout that quickly turned into a grin. Sean grinned back, waiting for their decision. Sean, we would be thrilled if you'd be willing to take over the cooking duties around here, Tori told him with a grateful smile. Let me show you where everything is, she offered generously. Sean accepted her offer graciously, and the two of them left for the kitchen, leaving Anya to rest in peace. She smiled to herself as she thought of them alone together. She had a feeling they would get along, and wondered absently if he was the one Tori had a crush on. Anya half listened to them laughing and talking as they got to know each other, until she drifted off into the deep sleep of the mentally and physically exhausted. Brandon Stone braced himself as Slate went into another fit of bucks in an effort to shake him loose. The dark gray mare was going to take a lot of patience to train. He stayed on with little difficulty, his long legs wrapped easily around her, his upper body moving with her, one hand firm on the reins, the other bracing on the saddle horn to keep himself from getting gutted by it. Like father, like daughter, he thought to himself while he clung to her like a burr. He wasn't a fan of people who left their horses untrained for so long, and Slate was going to be a handful because of it. She was already 3 and barely halter trained when he had found her and talked the girls into getting her. She would still be amazing once she was trained. It was just going to take a whole lot of time and patience to get her there. He sighed regretfully to himself, knowing that he should have done more groundwork with her before putting her in a saddle, but he was so eager to get her working that he jumped the gun a bit. When Slate stopped bucking, he calmly asked her for a walk, and she obliged, having exhausted her rebellion for the time being. He guided her through some halts and back and forth from a walk to a trot to a halt again, when his thoughts turned to the ranch and what the girls were doing with it. He couldn't help but be impressed by the number of diverse bloodlines they had managed to get for the ranch in such a short amount of time, especially considering the relatively small gene pool that the Canadian breed had to choose from. He didn't want to think about what Slate had cost them. Slate could be a cornerstone mare, her coloring alone making her quite the find, and he was responsible for getting her trained and working before she became a broodmare in a few more years. The girls had managed to procure 6 top-quality mares for their growing ranch, which was impressive, even if a few of them were too young to breed yet. They also had Slate's father, a rather rare dappled gray stud. Already 2 of the mares had been bred to him that spring, and 2 mares had dropped foals in the last few months from the artificial insemination breeding they had done the year before from a well-known Canadian stud from Alberta. His attention was drawn back to Slate when she sunfished and went into another series of twists and turns that had his muscles and joints reminding him that he was getting too old for this. At 35, he was hardly old, but he'd been riding since he could walk, and had spent a few years in the rodeo taking on broncos, breaking bones and claiming fame. He may not feel old, but his body certainly did. I thought Canadians were supposed to be even-tempered and easy to handle. What's wrong with that one? A voice called out suddenly from somewhere behind him. Brennan nearly jumped in the saddle at the untimely distraction, and Slate took the opportunity to start bucking again. The tip of Brennan's boot slipped out of the stirrup during the jolting, and, when she paused, he pulled leather and shifted to one side to regain the lost stirrup before Slate decided to go into another series of wild and dangerous bucks. Once he had regained the lost stirrup and had Slate a bit calmer, he answered in a clipped tone that, had the other man been wiser, would have warned him of the temper behind it. She's never been ridden before. Slate dropped her head forward with an angry snort, then threw it up again and reared. Brennan dug his bare boot heels into Slate's side and threw his weight forward when she started to go over backwards. She squealed her rage and bolted forward instead. It quickly took him to the opposite side of the circular training corral, and she skid to a stop and turned, brushing Brennan's leg painfully against the bars, before crow-hopping back down the middle of the ring. Jonathan watched with lazy interest. He had never broken a wild horse before, nor had he seen it done, but he didn't think it looked all that hard to do. He had bought his first and only horse, a Palomino gelding quarter horse named Sun, when he was already a full-grown and fully trained 5-year-old. He hadn't put a whole lot of thought into how Sun had gotten that way. Meanwhile, Slate had gone into another fit of bucking and had finally stopped, nearly breaking Brennan's nose for the suddenness of it. She stopped short, snapping his head forward, even though he was half expecting a sudden jolt. He took a deep breath and nudged her forward. She went willingly, so Brennan walked her around the arena once before he brought her to a halt and dropped the reins, vaulting off before she could take it in her head to go off again, wanting to end the session on a good and obedient note. He stood beside her and spoke quietly and calmly to her as he loosened the saddle, then walked walked her around the corral to cool her off. He took pride in the fact that he was only limping a little, considering the fire that raced down his leg every time the denim of his jeans brushed against the bruised flesh beneath where he'd scraped it against the fence. When he and the horse were both cooler, he turned to the stable hand. "Jonathan, the next time I'm sitting on a bucking horse, don't talk to me," Brennan reprimanded sharply. "You look okay to me," Jonathan muttered under his breath. "Better watch yourself," Sam warned Jonathan, having walked up unnoticed, in time to hear the disrespectful mutter. He'd come up from the barn just in time to hear the whole conversation and, after issuing the warning, casually ducked into the training corral to help Brennan with the young and a still excitable mare. "Move like your daddy, don't ya?" he asked her softly as he stroked her velvety nose. Sam Webster was one of the best hands Brennan had ever worked with. He was a judicious friend and steady worker who could be counted on for anything. He was shorter and stockier than Brennan, with dark brown hair and eyes. He was deeply tanned and weathered from his years of working outdoors, though he was only in his late 20s. Brennan felt lucky to have him there and valued the man's opinion. There was something about Sam that made him seem much older and wiser than his age suggested. "Good, you were watching. How did she look?" "She looked like she was having fun tossing you around. I'm pretty sure she's got a sense of humor," Sam replied with a half grin, patting Slate on the cheek affectionately. "Oh, come on, Sam. She isn't as bad as Boulder was at her age. It's just been a while since I've worked with one this young. I'm no spring chicken myself anymore," he grinned wryly. "She's already 3 with no training under her belt until we got a hold of her. At least Boulder was green broke, even if it wasn't all that successful." Brennan rubbed his neck after he handed the reins to Sam. He was lucky it wasn't broken, he chided himself, making a rookie mistake like losing a stirrup. "Boulder's her father, isn't he?" Jonathan asked from the fence where he was casually leaning against the wooden planks. "Yeah, Brennan bought Boulder from a mean old rancher who was caught beating him as a colt. Boulder, not Brennan, was getting beaten, that is," Sam clarified. "Anyway, Brennan raised Boulder from then on. The colt gave Brennan quite a few scars, too. Mean little thing he was back then," Sam explained with an abundance of patience evident in his tone. His long experience with training irritable horses and just overall working with them had taught him patience, persistence, and self-control, to name just a few qualities those who worked with horses typically either had or learned. "It wasn't his fault that he was abused," Brennan defended. "I probably would have been even more apt to hurt somebody if I was in the position he was in at the time." Brennan loved the handsome gray stallion he still considered his own. When he'd fallen on hard times and had finally had to sell Boulder several months ago, he'd been more than happy to take the job and spare room along with the sale. The girls had been thrilled when Brennan had found out Boulder had already sired a handful of foals, and had been more than happy to purchase Slate when Brennan found out she was available. "No need to get your panties all up in a wad, Brennan. Just saying it like it is," Sam stated calmly. "Guess I've got to watch my words around you now that you're my boss." Sam couldn't keep the teasing twinkle out of his eye. "Don't worry, Sam. I know you'll never change," Brennan replied with a chuckle. Sam turned to Jonathan, who was watching and listening intently. "So, Johnny boy, how did you find your way to this job?" Sam asked, as curious as he was amused. "Same as anyone else, I guess. Hard work and a good interview." He paused for a moment, something menacing flashing in his eyes. "And it's Jonathan, not Johnny boy." "Well, I guess we'll see about that. What's your problem with nicknames, anyway?" Brennan kept his mouth shut out of curiosity. How Jonathan reacted would tell a lot about his character. When he and Sam had first met, Sam had purposefully riled him up, and was as well, and over much more than a nickname. He'd also reacted poorly, though, come to think of it. He just wound up and punched Sam, and they'd gotten into an all-out fist fight. When it was over, they'd come away as friends. Somehow, he didn't think that would be Jonathan's style. He looked the man up and down from the top of his bleached blonde head to the bottom of his fancy boots, and suspected Jonathan was more snob than equestrian. He had certainly looked good on paper, though. "None of your business, and stick to Jonathan if you want to keep your nose straight," Jonathan threatened. There was a dark edge of anger in his tone that neither man missed. Brennan didn't like the set of Jonathan's jaw or the unyielding stance. The man had a piss-poor attitude. Whether he had a reason to hate nicknames or was just a bad apple, Brennan couldn't tell yet. "Really?" Sam said in sarcastic amazement. The sarcasm was subtle, barely detectable. Okay, I said the wrong one. But Brennan shot him a warning look just the same. Jonathan was not one to take any kind of humiliation in stride. "Yeah, really." Jonathan's chin inched up to make up for the 1-inch height difference between him and Sam's 5'11". His fists clenched until his knuckles turned white. Brennan didn't like the tension and anger radiating off him. He would have to keep a close eye on the man, would have to consider letting him go if his attitude didn't improve. Well, gents, I'd say it's time for you to wash up for dinner, Brennan said, stepping between them despite the fence that already blocked their paths, and taking Slate back from Sam. I'll finish up with Slate and be up in the house in a few minutes. Sam, I'm warning you. Brennan shot Sam a warning look to go with the verbal one. I know. I'll make sure to share the soap this time. I promise I'll even leave you some. Sam winked and walked away. Brennan shook his head at the two retreating figures before turning his attention back to Slate. He led the mare through the barn and turned her out into the pasture with the rest of the herd. He stood there, his arms resting on top of the gate, while he watched Slate race across the field. He admired her clean lines and graceful movements for a full minute before heading up to the house for his dinner. Anya woke to the delightful aroma of stew and fresh homemade biscuits. It smelled so good, her mouth began to water. She hadn't realized she was so hungry, but the scent of that stew drew her like a magnet. She inhaled deeply, savoring the delightful aroma once again before she opened her eyes. The mistake was opening her eyes. Sleep well? Tori asked accusingly. She was sitting on the chair across from the couch, arms and legs crossed, foot jiggling impatiently, and Anya wondered how long she'd been there. She simply grinned up at Tori from her cozy position. She yawned, covering her mouth with a fist, and snuggled deeper into the cozy couch. I hope you did, because our new boarders are coming early. I thought you should know. Tori looked worried, but spoke somewhat sarcastically. How early? Anya asked, sitting up quickly in panic despite her aching muscles. Just like that, her lethargy was gone, and she was back to being fully alert. Tomorrow morning, Tori said casually. There was an edge to her tone that only one who knew her well would recognize or even detect. Anya shook her head adamantly. No, they aren't. Tell me they aren't, she pleaded. She tried to think, her eyes wandering around the room, her mind on what had to be done, what could be put off. They are, Tori assured her on a sigh. Anya was tempted to rip her hair out, but settled for punching the arm of the couch. It didn't hurt, but it was satisfying. What's wrong? Brennan asked as he entered the room. One look at the stressed faces, and he almost wished he'd stayed in the barn. Well, you know the boarders, that couple that was supposed to come next week with their 2 Tennessee Walkers? Well, instead of next week, 7 days away, they're coming tomorrow. That's what's wrong, Tori said agitatedly. She had jumped up and was pacing with short, angry strides that covered the living room surprisingly quickly, considering she was 5'0" with the short legs to match. Well, what will it take to be ready for them to come tomorrow? Brennan asked reasonably. I'm sure we'll be able to get it all done if everyone pitches in. Anya was thoughtful for a moment. We have 4 empty stalls right now, all of them in the aisle near Boulder. 3 of them need repair still, so maybe if we put Marble and Slate out in the front field with the lean-to, we can get those stalls fixed up within the week and move the girls back in. If everybody works on the room tonight and before the boarders get here in the morning, we just might pull it off. You're serious? Tori asked in disbelief. Of course. Of course you're serious. You're almost always serious, she ranted more to herself than Anya. Well, the bedroom needs painted, furnished, and cleaned. I'm not worried about the stalls. Like you said, we can leave some of the horses out now that it's warm enough overnight. She resumed pacing, running through her head the time it would take to do all the things between 6 people. We can paint and clean the bedroom tonight, and one of the guys can help me get the furnishing done before they arrive in the morning, Anya said. Can this work? Tori asked Brennan, who had an amused look on his face. I think so, he replied confidently. Well, wait until after supper, Tori decided on the spot. Sean's probably ready to dump his stew on our heads as it is. The 3 of them head for the kitchen. They sat down to dinner and, after a quick prayer of thanks to God, consumed the homemade meal in record time. Sean, I swear that was the best meal I've had in years, Anya complimented him, patting her stomach in full appreciation of the hearty stew and delicious biscuits. I prefer you say ever, but I guess I'll take what I can get, Sean said with a mock-grieved look on his handsome face. He sighed. Oh, please, like you need any compliments for that ego of yours, Tori pointed out. I'll have you know that my ego is tiny and needs all the help it can get, Sean replied. Help through the door, maybe, Tori shot back, grinning. I hate to break it up, but don't we all have things to do? Jonathan interrupted rudely. There's always work to do around here. It's about prioritizing, Sam said sensibly, raising himself out of his chair and putting on his hat in a fluid economy of motion. Where's the paint? I'll go get it, he offered. It's in the corner of the tack room, Anya told him gratefully. There are 3 cans, and we'll need them all. Thanks, Sam. Anytime, and I mean that, he replied with a wink before heading out. Sam and Brennan went to get the brushes and rollers, and Tori and Anya started on the dishes. Jonathan just sat there doing nothing. Anya regarded him thoughtfully for a second. Jonathan, why don't you go give Sam a hand with that paint? It's difficult for just one person to carry all 3 cans, Anya suggested. She wasn't fond of someone who sat on their laurels while there was work to be done. It was especially annoying when she was paying that person. If he wasn't going to help, he should have left before dinner. She loaded a pile of dishes into the sink and ran the water before she started washing them. Tori was clearing the table. If Sam can't handle a few buckets of paint, I don't know what he's doing working on ranch, Jonathan said snidely. Besides, I think Son needs some exercise. Between you and me, I think he's become a little overweight since I moved him here. I think I'll go for a ride. He left without another word. Both women stared incredulously after him as he sauntered out of the house, the screen door slapping behind him. Was it just my imagination, or was he implying that we overfeed our horses? Anya demanded, scrubbing a dish with more force than was necessary. Tori was frowning thoughtfully. I think he was criticizing our feeding program. She shook her head in disgust. We should fire him. We hired Brennan to make those decisions for us, to do the firing and the hiring. We need to trust him to do his job, Anya reminded her. Well, at least dock his pay, Tori improvised. How about I talk to Brennan about it, get him to remind Jonathan of the rules, Anya suggested. Yeah, that works for me, Tori agreed. What works for you? Sam asked as he entered. He set the 3 gallons of paint on the table with a clatter. Jonathan bailed out on the work, so we're going to talk to Brennan about firing him, Tori told him with relish. Just make sure he doesn't fire him in front of anybody, Sam warned, suddenly serious. Why not? Because today I was bugging him, good-natured teasing that is, and he got furious as all get out. Be careful, Tori. Any man who can't take a bit of good-natured ribbing doesn't have one. Hey, Anya, you know all about that, wouldn't you? The teasing sparkle was back in his previously serious brown eyes. Hardy har har, I'm so good-natured, I'm not even going to be annoyed at you for implying that I'm not, she replied with a responding twinkle in her green eyes. Sam didn't have a chance to say anything else, as Sean and Brendan returned with the brushes. Oh good, you're back. Let's get painting, Anya declared. She dipped her hands in the now tepid water and flicked it at Brennan. For her trouble, he grabbed her, threw her over his shoulder, and dragged her upstairs, squirming and squealing, only to be unceremoniously dumped in the middle of the floor. Sean, Tori, and Sam laughed after them and followed with the paint, brushes, and rollers. They got over half the room done before the innocent painting turned into an all-out, free-for-all paint war. Paint flew in every direction. Nobody had a chance. They were all covered in yellow paint. Well, at least it has character, Anya said thoughtfully, looking at the splattered ceiling that was supposed to have stayed white. Now it looked almost as though it was covered in shooting stars. It would have been fine for a child, but the couple that would be staying there would expect something a little less artistic. Everyone groaned when they realized they now had to paint the entire ceiling. With no choice in the matter, they got down to business and had it done in no time. With the painting and cleaning done, Brennan and Sean heaved the heavy garbage bags out to the curb while Sam helped Anya and Tori with a few minor repairs in the adjacent bathroom. When they were done, Sam and Sean left for the night and everyone else retired to their own rooms in the large house. Jonathan's truck was already gone, so they assumed he'd left after riding his horse. The upstairs of the house boasted 2 full ensuite bedrooms, one of which was about to be rented out. The 2 smaller furnished bedrooms Tori and Anya occupied, a smaller, empty room they were using as storage, an office, as well as the bathroom the girls shared. The downstairs was just as impressive, with a huge room dedicated to the kitchen and dining room, the living room, a large bathroom, a mud and utility room, and 2 bedrooms, one of which was currently being used for storage, the other occupied by Brendan. They really had enough room for all the hands to live there, but not only were they not comfortable with the idea of a bunch of unattached men living under their roof, they also didn't have the place furnished or finished enough to house that many people. As it was, the rest of their meager furnishings would be going in the room their new boarders would be occupying. All right, guys, that's the end of chapter 1. If you liked it, please let me know, comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And if it's hit, then I will continue with further chapters.